Well, I'm Julie Anslow, one of the facilitators of the local chapter of 350.org. And I'd like to welcome you as our special guests tonight, as well as all of the people who've tuned in. We've had quite a bit of interesting things happening over the last couple of days. First of all, it's been announced that the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has now reached 419 parts per million. And this is the highest it's ever been for the past 4 million years on this planet. Of course, 350 is named after the 350 parts per million of CO2 that is considered the top limit of CO2 in the atmosphere that's safe for life to continue as we know it on this planet. So not only do we have to stop the increase in CO2 in the atmosphere, we have to back down. And that's where not only renewables, but regenerative agriculture and things like that are essential. So at this point, we're in a critical, instead of our leaders, international leaders, really taking a hold of this, the G7 leaders got together and really didn't do much of anything. Their plans that they proposed were very and are not going to begin to solve the problem. And that was just within the last week or so. Also in June, the temperatures worldwide have really accelerated. They topped 122 degrees Fahrenheit in 5 different Mideastern countries in this past week. 122 degrees Fahrenheit. In the US, we've got extreme heat in the west and southwest. And, when it hits 90 in Wisconsin, that's not so bad, considering it was 100 degrees in Minneapolis or Minnesota and in South Dakota. And I know I have a friend in Phoenix, and a week or so back, it was 110 degrees there. And so the temperature is accelerating. But there is something really exciting happening, and that's thousands of water protectors have arrived in northern Minnesota to stop the construction of Enbridge Line 3. And I saw an interview with Winona LaDuke today on Democracy Now! And she was saying there were at least 3,000 there over the weekend. Over 100 were arrested, blocking the access to the machinery, chaining themselves to the machinery that would be used by Enbridge. June 1st, Enbridge was able to start building and the pipeline again after having been closed down for a period. And now they're just bringing in thousands of workers to accelerate this, the building of this pipeline for this dirty tar sands oil that will be brought in from Canada. There is about a $9 project, and it's really interesting. The Enbridge knew that there would be a lot of opposition, just like there was to the KXL pipeline. And this demonstration that's starting now is going to be going on and on in northern Minnesota. And it's going to be comparable to what happened in Standing Rock. So Enbridge has actually hired and is paying the salaries of Minnesota police officers to control these protesters and to arrest them. So here's a Canadian multinational corporation who is paying United States police officers to protect their illegal access to this pipeline construction. This is the first I've ever heard of that happening. That may have happened before. But Enbridge is notorious not only for its continuous resilience to all their opposition, but they've had a very bad record on leaks from almost all their pipelines. I don't think there's a pipeline they've built that hasn't leaked. This is going to be going over 22 different rivers, this pipeline, line 3. It'll move 750,000 barrels of a day. What happened yesterday too was the federal agency got involved. It was the Department of Homeland Security, which basically assaulted these demonstrators with a helicopter coming in very, very low, announcing that they had to disperse, but it stirred up all the dry dust because of the drought in the area and created this sandstorm or dust storm that, and it did it 3 times consecutively. They are trying to say it was a mistake, but they did it 3 times. So this includes a federal agency now being brought in to disperse the demonstrators. So we've got to call on Biden to really do something about this. If you look on our website for 350 Milwaukee, or at our email alert that comes out, our wonderful email newsletter that Greg does, there's a link to sign a petition or letter to President Biden to put a halt to the line 3 pipeline, just as he did to the KXL. So it's very important that we make that move at least. And then also to know that there are 3 people from Milwaukee that are up there demonstrating with the water protectors. Amy Delman, who was very active with us a few years ago until her kids took over more of her life. And now she's come back on board and she's up there demonstrating. Jill Ferguson, and also Panetta Jackson, who's from the NAACP here in Milwaukee. Are there any others that you know of, Pam, Richard?
Yes, and I just texted Jill. She and got arrested, but they got released. And I just forwarded Jill the link. She's gonna try to get on and make a report later, maybe.
Oh, that'd be great. Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Pam. Pam Richard is the office person at Peace Action and does a lot of their organizing. So thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's about the news from the water protectors, and we need to talk about this. It's not in the straight media. Greg, do you want to say something about what you think about the reporting on this?
Well, when I searched for sources, of course, excuse me, they were live streaming on Facebook. If you do have Facebook account, you can watch the streams that they recorded. But I found very few mainstream news outlets doing any coverage. Minnesota Public Radio is doing coverage, and there is some coverage, well, actually in the New York Times and stuff, but like the Guardian and more of the popular ones, Daily Beast and stuff, I'm not seeing any coverage at this point. I did write to some of their editors and asked why not. I talked to Julie earlier. She was saying that, and she's right, that there'll probably be demonstrations going on all summer. So trying to get this into the news in front of the general public in the US would be worthwhile so that they know what's going on up there. So keep on chasing that down.
Yes, and PBS had a wonderful report last night. If you go to the Facebook page of Honor the Earth, they have something with Jane Fonda speaking. There's about a 7-minute segment that PBS did a very reasonable job of covering. And also MSNBC did pretty good. So those are all on Honor the Earth, and you can access them on Facebook.
Great.
I just wanted to say that what I did hear whether it was PBS or public radio, I know that they quoted that 60% completed number, which they said in Democracy Now! Was the wrong number, was too high.
Yeah. Yeah, Winona LaDuke says that they're about 35% complete of building this pipeline, not 60%. And Enbridge has been exaggerating the number on purpose to make it sound like, well, it's too late to do anything about it. So, but it's another really good source of information. I'm sure Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! Will be reporting on this on a regular daily basis. So.
Yeah, the PBS NewsHour a couple of nights ago had some pretty good reporting on it as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
A great irony is occurring out in Wyoming right now. The governor of the state is asking for people to pray for rain. And of course, we're looking at a historic drought out there. Lake Mead's going to fall to its lowest level since 1932. And of course, Wyoming is the main source of coal for the coal plants there. So what the governor doesn't seem to realize is that his state is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions and is now suffering rather mightily from climate change.
Mhm.
When he said pray for rain, all I could think of was that joke about the water kept coming up farther and farther, and what first the fire truck, and then the boat, and then the helicopter, because he was on the roof and he kept saying, no, God will save me, and then he died, and there he is standing in front of God, and he said, God, why didn't you save me? And God said, I sent the EMT, I sent the boat, I sent the helicopter. When this guy said he was praying for rain, I thought, how many times does God have to tell you what you have to do?
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's see if there is anything else that anyone wanted to mention before we get into our speakers. Oh, yes, Friday, we have our weekly stand for a livable climate at 12 noon down in Water in Wisconsin, in front of Chase Bank and in front of, right across the street, Wells Fargo, which are two of the largest supporters of fossil fuels, financial supporters, Chase being the number one. And so we've been out for the last year and a half or more, and maybe two. And we continue to educate people and let the bank know that we are present and that we're concerned. We've written letters and we will continue to be there. So join us. It's windy, but it's warm now. It's not like it was in December or January out there. So, okay, so let's move on to our program. Charlie, you contacted Heather about this. Would you like to say a few words about it?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be glad to introduce Heather. Heather joined Renew in July 2018 as a program director to deploy solar on homes, businesses, congregations, and nonprofits. Heather served for 6 years as legislative analyst for the city of Madison before joining Renew. Prior to that, she worked on programs and policies for the Clean Lakes Alliance, Natural Resource Defense Council, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She studied conservation biology as an undergraduate at UW-Madison and received her Master of Arts in International Environmental Policy from the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. And I'm very pleased to welcome Heather to our little conversation tonight. Thank you, Heather, for finding some time to visit with us.
Oh, well, very, very happy to be here. Thank you, Charlie and Julie and Craig and everyone for having us here today. I'm joined by two new colleagues from Renew Wisconsin who I'm really excited to introduce you to. So Andrew will actually be administering our slide presentation, and we think we got it down to exactly 24 minutes to leave plenty of time for a good question and answer. Okay, great. Well, while Andrew is pulling that up,
We are.
I am Heather Allen, and I've been in the role of executive director for just about 15 months. I took over when our former executive director, Tyler Hebner, was appointed to the commission. And I know he spoke with your group a couple times before, so we're excited to keep the tradition going with the new staff and me in my new role. So thanks, Andrew. Those look good if you want to keep going. So we've been around since May of 1991, actually. So this is our 30th anniversary, and we think fighting for clean energy never gets old. We work on solar, wind, biogas, geothermal, small scale hydro, electric vehicles, energy storage, and we're just exploring into the world of beneficial electrification, building electrification, things like that. Next slide, please.
Got everything up, Lauren.
So here's our team. And I'd like to just say, Jeremy, who is with us today in the top left corner here, is our new hire who's focusing on emerging technologies, especially electric vehicles. And Andrew comes with a lot of great experience working on electric vehicles, especially in Michigan and in Chicago. And Andrew comes to us as a policy analyst for Renew Wisconsin, working at the Public Service Commission for the last 10 years with most recently working on rate cases. So he has a lot of, these are some really amazing subject matter experts that we're really excited to bring onto the team. Okay, next slide, please. And we just got our group photos done like a week and a half ago, so we're really excited to show you. This is the first time since the pandemic that we've all been together. Some of the staff meeting for the first time because we've all been working remotely. So that's So tonight, what we'd like to really talk with you about, based on what we heard from you that you're interested in, is talking about solar and wind farms, what communities are thinking about those projects, pros and cons, and how we're talking about them. Distributed generation, so those are the rooftop solar projects, small scale projects that are customer owned. Electric vehicles, we'll talk a little bit about the budget and especially focus on energy, and some legislative items. But we want to hear from you. You know, you are on the front lines working on all of these issues, so we definitely want to hear from you.
Okay, I'm going to kind of set the stage for renewable energy by showing the current mix of Wisconsin's generation portfolio. This is a historical last 20 years. Not much change. Coal is still dominant in the state of Wisconsin, followed by natural gas and nuclear. So yeah, that's the basis of generation in the state. And as you know, Wisconsin has no geological resources for fossil fuels either. So we're fully dependent on other states or other countries providing that for us. However, the good news is the cost of wind and solar has dramatically decreased over the last 10 years and become much more available for utilities and utility customers to install both wind and solar. And that's starting to happen now with utility scale as well as distributed energy resources as well. This is just another slide to show that the cost of coal at around 10.2 cents per kilowatt hour is much more than the levelized cost of solar and wind, coming in at 4.3 and 4.2 cents per kilowatt hour most recently. So that dramatic dip in the cost of renewable energy has really made it cost competitive for utilities to start to invest in renewable energy. Speaking of utilities, the major investor-owned utilities in the state of Wisconsin do have decarbonization goals. So most of them are either at zero carbon or net zero carbon emissions by 2050 for their goals. A couple of utilities also have, in alignment with the Paris Climate Accord, 80% reductions by 2050. However, their parent company has said that they aim to be, as an organization, net zero by 2050. So it's about holding them to their goals so that we can get to 100% renewable energy.
So how do we get there? Well, we need to build a lot of renewable energy. So this is a map of, I'm getting a little feedback. I don't know if other folks can maybe mute. This is a map that shows a number of renewable energy projects that have been proposed for Wisconsin. And you can see that there's a concentration in southern Wisconsin, in large part because there's more need for energy resources in southern Wisconsin, and also solar is, more, it's more powerful the farther south we go. But basically, we have about 6,500 megawatts of solar proposed. We have very close to 300 megawatts operating today, and 1,000 megawatts of wind proposed, 737 are operating today. And we also have a couple hundred megawatts of battery storage. If everything on this map got built, we would be at 33% renewable energy in Wisconsin. And this is a lot of projects that would have to get approved and actually get constructed. Most of these won't, to be realistic. This is sort of the ideal list from the developers, what they want to see constructed and built. So we have it just shows you how much we have to do to reach our clean energy goals. And this is a snapshot of solar farms. There was an interest from you all in talking about solar farms and how communities are perceiving solar farms and any questions or concerns they might have. The thing we think that's really interesting, especially when it comes to regenerative agriculture, is that you can plant between and underneath solar panels with native grasses, with pollinator-friendly plantings that can contribute to soil regeneration, can reduce runoff, can rebuild soil quality, create deep roots, rebuild nutrients. So there's and create habitat for pollinators. So there's some real benefits to proper land management associated with solar farms that can have spillover effects for neighboring communities. We do hear concerns from folks in rural communities about land use. Is this the right use of the land? And we always reassure people this is a temporary land use. You can always remove all of the racks and posts and panels after the life of the project, which is usually at least 2 or 3 decades minimum. But really, you could return this land to agricultural use afterwards, with the exception of where you do a little bit of a concrete pad for inverters and things like that. So we think that this is really a nice, seamless resource to integrate into agricultural communities. And our current public service commissioner is in that solar farm in those flowers right there at the Downsville project.
Heather,
Sure.
I'd like to do a little housekeeping thing real quick. I want to mention to people that this program tonight and also this presentation is being recorded and will be available to our members in the future. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So this is a map here that shows where a number of the small scale solar farms are located in Wisconsin. Most of them are in the western half of the state, and many of them are actually owned by Dairyland Power. These blue dots are some Dairyland Power projects ranging from 1 to 5 megawatts each. That's between 5 to 25 acres. So you can kind of picture the size of those projects. And altogether, that's about 35 megawatts of solar capacity. One of the reasons that solar farms and wind farms are very beneficial for communities is, in addition to landowner lease payments, there is a revenue formula that's basically in lieu of property taxes. The project reimburses the community for the project at a ratio of $4,000 per megawatt. So, for example, the Badger Hollow Solar Farm, which we'll talk about in a second, is a 300 megawatt project. So for each year, that project will bring in $1.2 million into local government coffers. And that will be split between the county and the township. And what's interesting there is that this actually only applies to projects that are larger than 50 megawatts. That's just how that municipal utility aid formula was written. So for this to apply, a project has to be larger than 50 megawatts. And that's in addition to landowner lease payments. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the more visible solar farms that were approved pretty early on in 2019. Actually going from right to left, the Two Creeks Solar Farm on the right here, that was energized in November of 2020. That's the first large-scale solar farm to be energized in Wisconsin at 150 megawatts, and that's located right on Lake Michigan in Manitowoc County. In the middle of the map here, Richland County Solar Farm, that's 50 megawatts, or just under 50 megawatts. That's a Savion project that is going to be part of the Alliance 1,000 megawatt solar portfolio. So they have a number of projects all over Wisconsin. And then the southwest corner here is Badger Hollow Solar Farm. That's in Iowa County near Dodgeville. That's the 300 megawatt project, and that is under construction.
And good evening, everybody. This leads us right up into local government and the leadership local governments that play here in Wisconsin. You know, there are currently 147 Wisconsin communities that are committed to clean energy, which is significant. 147 communities in Wisconsin. But the communities you see listed here in the slide, they are devoted to 100% clean energy by 2050. Again, a perfect example of local government leadership in clean energy and setting the example for their communities. And you know, where the previous slide showed local government leadership in clean energy, here we see corporations committed to clean energy as well. You know, it's a whole multi-sector approach to clean energy. And why is this significant? Well, you know, like we all say in the world of sustainability, you know, it's going to take a multi-sector approach to solve these issues. In this case, moving towards clean energy. And we see that multi-sector approach right here in Wisconsin. So why do we focus on electric vehicles anyways? Well, I mean, 25% of Wisconsin's energy consumption is used for transportation. Next slide, please. And we do spend $8.2 billion on fossil fuels every year. And those fuels come from without the state of Wisconsin itself. Which leads us to EVs. EVs can be sourced by local renewable energy sources like solar, or as we like to say, they can drive on sunshine. Which obviously can cut back our dependence on fossil fuels while we move towards clean energy sources. So this is a snapshot of Wisconsin's electric vehicle stations, you know, not just Wisconsin, but the Midwest as well. Current locations, which kind of leads us into EV opportunities here in Wisconsin. There are efforts underway now across the region to increase charging in and around Wisconsin, along corridors, along some of the lesser used highways, and some of the rural and urban areas that have been traditionally underrepresented. And even locally in Milwaukee, you have the Environmental Collaboration Office, which is planning some EV adoption and infrastructure deployment as well with partners there. We'll touch on some legislative and policy items here in a second, but a major area for EV opportunities right now is just greater outreach and education to help curtail range anxiety, increase knowledge of EVs, how to locate stations, how to charge, the whole kind of 9 yards when it comes to general EV knowledge. And we do this, you know, largely by, you know, of course, blogging and articles and whatnot, but also hosting events such as ride and drives and other similar events to just give the community a hands-on experience, that experiential learning with EVs and how to charge and things of that nature. So we all know that Volkswagen cheated on its diesel emissions testing several years ago, which led to funding for states, you know, for projects to decrease emissions in the transportation sector. Based on number of you know, registered VW vehicles in that state. Each state can use up to 15% of its allocation for stations, but Wisconsin has not used any VW funds yet for stations at all. So our governor has again proposed $10 million to be used for EV stations. That likely won't happen. What's likely going to happen is there's going to be separate legislation introduced for $5 million for EV stations, along with an EV corridor designation grant program. We don't quite know how that's all going to shake out yet or how that's going to look. But it's not the 10 million we anticipated, but it's a start. And just in general, you know, we advocate for effective policies in the EV market, whether that's helping stakeholders keep informed of funding opportunities or directly advocating on behalf of the industry for, you know, some of the hot item legislative topics. But one of the things I like to point out here is the EVs for Good program, which is what Renew Wisconsin, which we administer. This program is for mission-based nonprofits. And we provide up to 20% of the total cost of an electric vehicle, new or used. We cap that at $5,000, or we cap that at $10,000 for a new or used electric vehicle van or bus. And we also provide funding for charging stations as well. If someone is interested in learning more about this, we'd be more than happy to discuss this, you know, during this meeting today or offline at some future time.
Okay, we're going to shift back to solar energy, in particular small scale distributed customer owned solar energy. The 3 installations you see before you were installed by IKEA, American Family Insurance, and Madison College recently within the last few years. These are all over 1 megawatt size commercial installations. A lot of the installations by customers are driven by Focus on Energy incentives. Some of you may be familiar, Focus on Energy provides incentives for Wisconsin utility customers to install energy efficiency measures. They also install renewable measures as well with regards to their incentives. Final numbers we have for 2019, 768 homes and 135 buildings received focus incentives to install solar PV totaling over 15 megawatts. And numbers we've seen from the Solar Energy Industries Association showed that 2020 was much bigger even for the residential sector with over 13 megawatts of residential photovoltaic installed in 2020. And while that number of 12 megawatts remained about constant for non-residential in 2020. So besides the benefits immediately to the customers, obviously there are economic development opportunities associated with installing renewable energy as well. Recent reports from Clean Jobs Midwest had a fact sheet and put together a report detailing 76,000 clean energy jobs in Wisconsin. Most of the jobs come from energy efficiency, such as what Focus on Energy incentivizes, but a lot of these also come from renewable energy, storage, grid modernization, and advanced transportation, such as what Jeremy was discussing, is also one of the fastest growing job markets as far as a clean energy job sector. We also like to gather stories about workers who are able to get jobs through clean energy installations. Mike Lamont and Tyler to the left here work for Sun Peak, which is a Wisconsin solar installation company. And April Smith to the right had an interview in which she detailed her work at the Quilt Block Wind Farm west of Madison. And in the interview, she was quoted as saying, I'm going to always feel good driving past the turbines and seeing what we built. So a lot of economic development for the state and for the individual families of these workers. We also wanted to talk with you guys this evening about community engagement. Obviously, 350.org Milwaukee's had a lot of community engagement in the city and county of Milwaukee, working on a resolution for climate and economic equity. And we're interested in Renew Wisconsin and building a coalition and partnership with you all at 350.org to discuss about some of the upcoming governor's budget, legislative and other issues that are kind of hot topics right now and trying to get renewable energy pushed forward. So that's what we're going to start shifting and talking about right now.
So thank you, Andrew. Yeah, so the governor's recent budget proposal, it's unprecedented in that it has 28 clean energy provisions that move us closer to clean energy and decarbonization. Again, this is significant. It again demonstrates, our political leadership paving the way for clean energy and setting the example for our communities, much like our local governments are doing in the slide we saw earlier, only now this is at the highest level of government in the state of Wisconsin. So looking at some of the provisions, we see the requirement for climate change plans and mitigation programs. We see the, renewable and clean energy research grant. But what I want to point out here is the establishment of an Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy. Right now, the office is temporary and only has one employee. But the governor's proposal would create a permanent office that consistently focuses on clean, renewable energy, sustainability, and the diversification of the energy market, again, on a permanent basis to continually focus on these things moving forward. And so we touched on the governor's proposed $10 million in VW funds for EV stations earlier. Like we said, it's likely not going to happen. What's going to happen likely is going to be the $5 million introduced in separate legislation for stations and a clean energy corridor grant. We don't know how that's going to look yet. We also aren't sure yet what's going to happen with the governor's proposed $700,000 of VW funds for the state, a state EV fleet. But what I'd like to point out here is the proposed $5 million in transportation funded bonding for EV stations. This could really, complement or supplement the $5 million VW legislation that will likely be introduced. And together, if we got together this $10 million for EV funding, right now we have, roughly 350 stations statewide with 752 ports. This funding can really help kickstart much needed infrastructure in a lot of the gaps you see throughout the state along the corridors and some of the traditionally underrepresented areas. So stay tuned to that. We're hopeful we can get both of those pushed through.
Yeah, and Jeremy, thanks. Included in the governor's budget was a doubling of the Focus on Energy program that utilities are required to contribute to the statewide program. Right now, utilities contribute 1.2% of their operating revenues under Governor Evers' proposal. That would double to 2.4, or over $100 million every year for energy efficiency and renewable energy incentives. Governor Evers would also propose to include a specific low-income program targeted at low-income households to have a specific program tailored to the needs of low-income utility customers for once again installing energy efficiency, renewable energy in their households in order to manage their bills. This is not currently offered in Focus on Energy program, so this would be new to that program. And Jeremy, you want to talk about the last couple of PACE items?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. So I just want to point out here that, in addition to the two PACE provisions you see in the slide, that there are currently discussions underway to amend Wisconsin's CPACE statute to explicitly allow for EV stations. Again, we don't know how that's going to look yet. We've heard this bill might be out for co-sponsorship in a couple of weeks. We haven't seen any language yet, whether it would solely be for DC fast charging stations or level 2 or both or what. But what's significant here is just to have this language explicitly included in the CPACE statute, because right now it's kind of ambiguous, depending on your interpretation. When you read it, it could allow for EV stations or it could not allow for EV stations, so it's kind of an opener now. So this language, again, would just make it explicit that yes, the PACE financing could be used for EV stations moving forward.
I want to let you all know about an upcoming webinar that Renew Wisconsin is teaming up with a few other organizations to discuss Focus on Energy and the economic benefits for businesses across the state. Scott Blakeman of Clean Wisconsin, Maddie Waskowitz of the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and Charles McGinnis of Johnson Controls will be panelists discussing these issues. We're also trying to line up a couple more panelists, and we'll be updating our registration page with that information. You can probably see in the lower left-hand corner, I'll also try to paste that in the chat section at the end of our presentation so that you guys can be aware and register for this upcoming webinar on June 29th. Also want to talk about some important legislation that is going to drop pretty much any day now. We're anticipating perhaps next week. We could see some important legislation to get specifically solar energy move forward in the state of Wisconsin. The first one is called third-party financing. So right now there's a legal gray area in the state of Wisconsin, and some of you may be aware of the We Energies case in which the utility denied the interconnection of the city of Milwaukee to contract with Eagle Point as a developer for solar for the city. We Energies denied this interconnection simply because the financing would be based on a cents per kilowatt hour basis, which the utility claimed only the utility can do. So this case will be before the Public Service Commission very soon, but there still may be uncertainty even after the Public Service Commission's decision. So legislation would clarify it in the state statute and make it legal definitively for developers to be able to have a financing mechanism and sell on a cents per kilowatt hours basis. Why is that important? It allows a pay as you save type model. So you'd be paying and receiving the benefits of reductions on your utility bills immediately. And it would reduce the upfront costs and allow a lot of low to middle income households and businesses that can't afford the upfront payments as well. Another legislative opportunity is third-party community solar. It's not available in Milwaukee, but some utilities have a community solar program, but they're mostly all subscribed. So there's currently not much access to community solar in the state of Wisconsin. That being said, 21 states in the District of Columbia do allow for this type of third-party non-utility community solar program, but not in Wisconsin yet. So just like the financing mechanism called third-party financing, there's little or no upfront cost to community solar, and you don't have to install anything on your rooftop. It creates a pay-as-you-save model so that you can pay the developer and get instant bill credits on your utility bill and be able to have savings that outweigh the costs immediately. So this is something that is, we're talking about gaining access to all Wisconsinites, including low to middle income customers. This is a great program, and we look forward to working with you guys on this legislation.
And one resource that we've put together for groups like yourself who are working with your school district, your university, or your local government is the Clean Energy Toolkit. So it's available at wisconsincleanenergytoolkit.com. Renew, together with Sierra Club and Wisconsin Conservation Voters, wrote this booklet, and we have paper copies that we can send to you as well. But it's really just a collection of resources, how to get started, how to engage the public, how to work on equity, and most importantly, probably is financing these projects. So there's some really interesting information in there and resources. So let us know if you're interested in a paper copy, or go to our website at cleanenergytoolkit.com. That's there for you. And I think that is what we put together for you, but I saw some good questions coming in the chat, and now we're ready to have a little back and forth and hear what parts you'd like to dig into more. One of the questions that I see here, well, there's a question on fast chargers, and Jeremy, that map that we had up that you showed the chargers, are those all fast chargers?
Can you go back to that? That's all. Let me go back to mine as well. That should be all public charging stations. No, so that's all public charging stations in slide 20, Andrew. So this is all public charging stations in Wisconsin and Minnesota, Iowa, and looks like a portion of Iowa, a portion of Illinois. So public charging meaning level 2, DC fast, and Tesla. So that's the whole gamut. We only have roughly 50 charging stations in Wisconsin. I think last I checked in AFDC, it was 48 stations, roughly 49 stations.
How would somebody find all the fast chargers? Is there one map with all the fast chargers?
I could create one.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty easy. If somebody's interested in having that. Sorry, I can't see the questions in the chat. I only see one question. So if anyone's interested, I can create that chart and send it. I mean, I could do that now. It'd take me 2 minutes to do, honestly.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up about the chargers. I'd like to clear that chat before we get on to everybody else. I see Charlie had a question. Charlie?
Sure. When I was in California driving a BMW i3 up the coast, we found it pretty tricky to find fast chargers that we could charge the BMW on. It seemed like 90% of them were all Teslas, which we didn't have access to. So there seems to be a caste system in California on chargers. Do you see the same situation happening here in Wisconsin?
I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, I can look in. Who's speaking? Is this Charlie? Sorry, I missed.
Yeah, it's me. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I also saw your question in the chat too about how many fast chargers. So I can tell you first, just for your own awareness, you can always go to the Alternative Fuels Data Center and select electric for a fuel station, and you can select Tesla. You can deselect Tesla. You can just have DC fast. You can have level 2. It will show you every type of station out there. Some people like PlugShare as well, but no, I don't necessarily see that same thing. California's a different breed. I mean, California, if you look at the certain apps, you would see a lot of DC fast. And in fact, I did map out a route from Oregon to California a couple months ago based on an article I read online. And there are plenty of DC fast out there. It just depends where you look. And of course, it might be a different corridor you were on as well. So no, I don't see, going back to your original question about, does Tesla have the lion's share of stations in Wisconsin? No, they don't. In fact, I'm going to, once I'm done answering this question, Charlie, I'm going to go to the AFDC right now and just look up really quickly what they have exactly in Wisconsin, and that'll help, dial in that for you as well.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. We've got a couple, we want to have the questions raised in order in that reaction session, as opposed to reading the chat. We're just trying to catch up with things here. I'd like to move to Greg Walter. Greg.
Let me start by asking a question from the chat. Joe says that he doesn't have a microphone tonight. So his question was, well, the way he phrased it was political question, colon, how many of these proposals will get passed in this biennial budget?
I can speak to that. That's a great question. Thank you, Joe and Greg. Very few of these excellent provisions will be ultimately included in the adopted budget. The reason for that is that the GOP has said that they are approaching the budget as if they're starting from scratch, right? That all of the governor's proposals are sort of not in the set of things they're thinking about as they are looking at the budget. And so most of these clean energy provisions would not come out of a bipartisan approved budget. However, a lot of these provisions, some of these that we're pretty excited about, have a future, and that future would be just a separate bill. So for example, a couple of the electric vehicle bills, including a Volkswagen funding bill, we think will be just introduced by Republicans and supported in a bipartisan fashion and adopted. It's possible the clean energy jobs item would move forward. I would really hope that some of the state procurement to get renewable projects on state buildings could move forward. The biogas, there's some good stuff happening in biogas conversations, but while we are extremely grateful that the governor put this bold budget together and it has moved the conversation significantly, the machinations happening at the Capitol will mean that they are probably not ultimately going to be part of the budget, but they could very well be part of our future anyway.
Also from Steve Ferns, there's a question about what's the status of Eagle Point Solar case before the PSC.
Oh, sure. We think, Andrew might want to weigh in here, but we think we'll get a decision in the near future, but that decision, best case scenario, is going to be a 1-to-1 decision, which is ultimately doesn't advance the ball on third party. Andrew, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, all of the evidence gathering has now ended for the case, and we're waiting for the commissioners to decide when to put it on the agenda. I thought previously it would be sometime in May. It has not. They've had a lot of solar construction applications and a lot of other applications on their plate, is true, but we are waiting. It could be as early as this Thursday. It could be any week. Usually on Thursday is when they have their open meetings. So soon, decision will come.
Thank you. I see Charlie on the chat, and then Pam has joined us. I'm going to jump to Pam right away. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay, well, I have a Prius, and I think it's a good stepping stone to being able to have an electric vehicle, and you can buy them used now. And there are certain ways you can drive to use your Prius where you're almost always on the electric battery if you keep a really steady pace once you get it moving. So it is an amazing contraption.
Yeah, it's a great point. Driving behavior really determines your battery range. Your manufacturer will give you a range anyways, an estimate, and they're all estimates based on weather conditions and driving behavior and other things. So yeah, great point. If you try to be steady with driving, you can really extend the ranges.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Pam. Hey, Charlie, go ahead, please.
Sure. Heather, what is Renew's position on the Ixonia gas storage facility that PNM wants to invest in? I noticed the local community there is trying to rally against it. And then also the folks in the Driftless area are not too keen on the 680-foot wind turbines that Pattern is proposing to install out there that will be able to be seen from the bluffs of the Mississippi to Madison. So I just wonder what you think about that.
That is not a popular project.
It certainly isn't. Yes.
I am not familiar with the Ixonia gas storage facility. I'd be happy to learn more about it if you want to share it with us. But is 350 taking a position on that particular project or involved in that particular project?
I just heard about it on a Northside Rising Zoom call today.
Okay.
And it's apparently, We Energies is saying they want to spend a few $100 million on a natural gas storage facility to be located in Ixonia, which I guess is on the way to Madison, because they feel they can, if they store a whole lot of gas there, then they're insulated from rapidly rising gas prices during the wintertime. Sort of a battery idea in a sense. But of course, the local people are not too keen on having a gigantic natural gas storage facility in their community.
Right. We'll look into it. Andrew, I don't know if you've been following that one.
Yeah, so we did get wind of something. I think it might be that from Sierra Club. And per discussion with Michael, I think perhaps that's before the Department of Natural Resources for environmental review, but it's not before the Public Service Commission. I was trying to search for dockets and try to see where that was coming up. So it might be under the dollar threshold that would be under the Public Service Commission's review. I'm not quite sure what the status is.
In general, though, I think Renew has a policy position that we don't support any additional fossil fuel infrastructure. I mean, it's more costly and it is not as nimble. It's certainly got a number of very unfortunate externalities. The more fossil fuel infrastructure we built. So it just doesn't make sense to keep investing in fossil fuel infrastructure when renewables beat them out hands down financially. I mean, energy storage is going to be important, but as we convert to electric vehicles and electric buildings that are much more powered by electricity, even for heating and cooling, we won't need to rely on natural gas the way we do. We certainly don't need to continue to invest in it. But the Pattern Wind Energy Project, this project has strong opposition for sure, and partly probably because of the size of the project and the size of the turbines themselves. So this would be a 600 megawatt wind farm. It'd be in two parts, straddling two counties. This project, just to give you some perspective, we have about 737 megawatts of wind today. And we have a fact sheet on our website and probably a map, and we have maps, and maybe I can put that in the chat, that show where the wind farms are today. But so if you imagine, we probably have at least a dozen wind farms today. So and they're all spread out throughout the state. So I think there's probably, the local communities are thinking about scale, and they're thinking about, really it's the size of the project. So we're paying attention to it. Certainly wind is a good fit for Wisconsin, but that project, it's just big, and I think that's what people are worried about.
Thank you very much, Steve, and thanks, Charlie. Were you done, Charlie?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Greg up, and I see in the chat that Steve Ferns has a number of questions. Steve, we'd like for you to get on the line and ask those next. Right now, we've got Greg Walter.
Okay, well, where to start? I think look at focus on energy. We've got a couple questions about it. One of it, which I have done a little bit of research. I've been on a number of conference calls or Zoom calls, and some of them have been with people who live in the lower income communities in Milwaukee. And there's discussion about focus on energy and insulating homes, getting better, more energy efficient lighting and appliances and stuff. One of the things that I took away from that is that many of those people that are affected for any number of reasons aren't really aware or have the the connections and stuff, for instance, internet and stuff, to actually apply for those programs, or they're not aware that those programs exist. And of course, if you're a renter, there may be some conflicts and so forth. Is Renew doing anything with outreach? And looking at how to make people aware of those, as well as potentially providing assistance in using those kinds of programs?
Well, we heartily support Focus on Energy, and in the last quadrennial planning process, we really fought to protect Focus on Energy, which was facing some cuts. But our mission is primarily about renewables. So there's some amazing Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance and Elevate Energy and Sustain Dane now. All these, there's other groups, a number of other groups working on great working with Focus on Energy, working with energy efficiency programs to and weatherization programs to make sure people have access to the programs. So Renew doesn't take up that mantle because there's lots of great groups working on that, but we work to protect the funding for Focus and build awareness about Focus, especially as it relates to renewable energy. I think you're right. I think there's a long way to go in awareness of the programs. There is certainly room for education outreach and marketing for Focus, and there is room to expand the program. Thanks, Andrew, for pulling this up. So Ever's proposal to double the budget for Focus, it could have tremendous benefits, because you could expand the low and moderate income programming, and you could also expand it into new categories of work, into electric vehicle charging stations or services, additional services for multifamily buildings, including building electrification, so shifting off of natural gas for heating. Some of these newer technologies are not explicitly included in the Focus on Energy framework right now, and you would actually need legislative changes to make that happen. So we are working in that area and building general awareness, but there's some great groups doing that on the ground work to make sure people have access to the programs.
Thank you.
Just going to add that obviously the governor's office is aware of that issue. They've introduced that in their budget to have a specific program cut out for low-income customers. So if that piece of legislation were to pass, then we would have more detailed marketing and communications directly targeted at how folks receive information from low-income sectors across the state.
Thank you. Thank you, Renew team. Thank you, Greg. Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please join us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My questions are sort of, I guess, digging a little deeper in the storage related thing, because of its role in terms of, saving it for evening hours or, perhaps a little longer. And I guess, could you give a little bit more information or direct us where we could find more about the nature of any storage projects that may be coming up? The other thing is more policy related, whether that's legislation or something that the governor is planning to do. So I noticed, like, for instance, in the PACE model ordinance thing that you brought up, or no, excuse me, let's see, where was that? Yeah, the storage wasn't mentioned as being part of that under number 13.
I think in the microgrid, the slide before this, or even before that, addresses microgrids. Does it? Let's see. Resiliency planning. There is a piece in Ever's budget proposals. We didn't include everything in these slides, but there is a piece on microgrid research, and the excuse me, the Public Service Commission's Office of Energy Innovation is launching a new microgrid pilot program. So there are opportunities at the smaller scale happening with microgrids and energy storage in Wisconsin, which is great. At the larger scale, we are seeing a couple of the large solar farms are now adding batteries to the project. So the Paris Solar Energy Center, I think that's not far from where you all are, is going to have batteries associated with the project. And there's a project in Koshkonong, that's Eastern Dane County, And that's proposed to have batteries, large scale batteries associated with the project as well. So we're seeing, to answer your general question, we're seeing batteries, homeowners are adding batteries, businesses are adding batteries, and then there's a number of pilot programs sort of pursuing batteries from a resilience microgrid strategy, and the large scale solar farms are exploring adding batteries. In fact, here's a fun fact. One of the projects, I think it's still on the map. Andrew, can you go to that map that's at the very beginning of the presentation? One of the projects on this map, if it's still there, is a proposal, I believe it's from Alliant, to shore up a transmission capacity issue with a battery and not add any other. See, if you look on this map on the right along Lake Michigan, you see that 20 that's just standalone batteries. That's really interesting. They're just thinking that they could shore up a transmission problem with a little bit of energy storage, just standalone, attach it to the transmission line, which is really interesting. So I think you're seeing the battery technology is improving so and becoming so much more affordable that they're finding new uses for it. And in other states, interesting things are happening with people bringing their own devices and utilities working with the customer to manage the storage of the energy on that battery for the benefit of the grid. And in fact, Kell is actually introducing a similar pilot where they would work with large commercial customers, like big entities that want to do renewables and they want to do energy storage. And then Kell would work with them so that Kell could have some kind of management over that energy storage to improve grid resiliency and grid stability, evening out demand. So there's a lot happening with batteries.
And I'd like to even say, just from the federal level, I think Heather gave a really good overview of the state, but right now, and I can forward this to some of the folks afterwards, even just today, the DOE announced additional funding for energy storage initiatives, nationwide. So something to keep your eye on, as well as maybe some of that funding might trickle down to some of our partners here in the state as well.
Thank you.
And the Bad River Tribe just energized a very large microgrid in northern Wisconsin. So there are more and more projects happening.
You good, Steve?
Yep, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve from Kenosha. Thanks, Renew team. I don't see, Pam, did you have a question yet or point?
No.
Nope. The stack is open. I wanted to mention that Jill Ferguson has rejoined us from up in Minnesota, I believe. We're going to have her speak to us at the end of this discussion about what's happening up there. Thanks for being with us, Jill. Anyone for the stack? I see we've got Joe, Charlie.
Yeah, okay, here's a question for all the Renew folks. It's great that the utilities have embraced all this renewable energy and they've gone on this massive spending spree. And of course, they get to include all this steel in the ground in their rate base. Are you having discussions there at Renew about how we're going to pay for all this without dramatically increasing the costs of our energy bills? And I see that Mass and Gas and Electric and Alliant is already applying for a 3 to 4% increase in rates. So how are we going to pay for all this new stuff? And then, of course, we still have to pay for the coal plants that are being decommissioned.
This is a great question. I'm definitely open to Andrew jumping in here. So, as we said up front, renewables, even unsubsidized renewables, beat out coal, better than 2 to 1, and they're competitive with natural gas. And then over the long term, where they really win out is because you don't have any fuel inputs, right? So these are really economical solutions for the long term. It is true that a number of the utilities are proposing. Some of the utilities are proposing increases in rates, but I don't think they're even attributing that to the shift to renewable energy. There's a lot of costs that utilities have that are, you know, additional transmission and maintenance of lines and distribution and all sorts of other things. The retirement of coal-fired power plants, that is a question of how, you know, that's an important political, philosophical question about how the utilities, how they finance those retirements and how they manage their various obligations, and how the ratepayers' economics are handled. And that's, I don't know if Andrew wants to jump in here. It's a very complicated negotiation, really, that's happening, but it's not, you know, we're not going to be paying more because of renewables. In fact, we will be paying less over time because of renewables. But I think the utilities would tell you this is still a very small part of their portfolio, and they have, I don't want to, you know, carry their water for them, but over time, renewables will save Wisconsin a lot of money, is my short answer. But the details of how we get out from under the financial burden of existing fossil fuel infrastructure, that has yet to be worked out. There's a couple bills being introduced on securitization, where some of those details will be refined. I think Senator Coles is introducing a securitization bill, and Senator Neubauer, Representative Neubauer, had introduced one in previous years to try and structure the options there. But the good news is they are retiring coal-fired power plants faster than we expected, and that is really happening, and that has tremendous climate benefits.
What I would add is the concept calling the industry steel for fuel. So there's a natural mitigation of the new costs associated with investments, in this case, renewable energy investments, a lot of capital upfront costs for the utilities, but at the same time, their fuel costs are going down because they're generating less at their existing gas and coal-fired power plants. They're just generating less. So at the PSC, they have annual fuel audits that they do, and they see that their the fuel costs are dramatically dropping, and they will even more so dramatically drop once renewable energy gets installed. Number two, we work very closely with consumer advocates, the Citizens Utility Board. They're the residential and small commercial customer advocates, and the larger consumer advocates of Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group. They're really the budget hawks, if you will, of the utility world, and they fight always back and forth in rate cases and in some of these settlements to get the best possible outcome for Wisconsin ratepayers, and we work with them to better understand their concerns. And then thirdly, securitization, which Heather mentioned, in the last settlement that We Energies had, there was a settlement for, I can't remember which unit, but it was securitization. So you're essentially switching from a high rate of return that the utility was guaranteed by the commission decades ago to what the market bears right now, which is a lower rate of return. So it's the switching of the financing, but they still have the certificate of public convenience and necessity to be able to collect the monies from the Public Service Commission.
Thank you. I'm looking at the clock, and we're also looking forward to this report in terms of Enbridge Line 3. I've got Joe and Chris, then Julie. Could we be brief, please? Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I'll read this for Joe. He says, one of them mentioned the Southeast Wisconsin Racine Kenosha Walworth Solar Group by Zoom webinar schedule, and he's put that in the chat. So I guess that he just wanted to do a communication as opposed to a question. So why don't you go to the next question, George?
Okay, thanks, Greg. Thank you, Joe. Chris.
Hi, I understand that gas is about $70 a barrel right now, but it's been talked about that it may be going up to $100 a barrel. I'm thinking maybe it's time for, I don't know, public service ads or some kind of a push for, think about renewables now. It was just something I heard, and I'm thinking maybe we can take advantage of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. I see heads nodding from Renew. Julie Enslow.
One thing that lurks at the back of my mind every so often is that the environmental impact of solar and wind isn't totally pure, because it depends on some extractive industries to have materials to produce the solar panels and the windmills, and of course the batteries also are very dependent on lithium and various other extractive minerals. And it's something I think that we probably have to say a balance between, fossil fuels and global warming and the climate change and the future of life on this planet, really with some environmental issues that will come from some of these other extractive industries, and to not just bury our head in the sand and pretend that's not going to exist.
Oh, for sure. No.
And also the environmental justice issues with some of those extractive industries, for example, in Africa and places like that, where there's a rush on lithium mining. So
yeah, these are very important issues, and it's definitely something Renew is looking into, figuring out all the details so that we can share them with the public. I can tell you the good news. I have a couple pieces of good news for you. One is that solar panels are recyclable, and we actually have had some conversations with a panel recycler who I think is based in Ohio, but is looking to figure out how to get the panels that are going to, either be broken, especially for these huge projects. There will be panels, there's just a portion of panels that don't even get installed because maybe they came off the truck chipped or whatever happens. So there's always gonna be some panels that need to be recycled, and especially as these projects reach the end of their useful life. So we're working on that. We've had some conversations with the governor's office about this company. And I mean, I would love to see Wisconsin become a solar panel glass recycler. I think it would be fantastic. There is also progress on wind turbine blade recycling, which was a problem for the industry for a while, but it looks like they've identified opportunities and mechanisms to start recycling wind turbine blades, which is very important as we install more wind turbines. You're right, there are always going to be extractive industries. There is no energy source that is without environmental impact. So we do have to balance all of the impacts. And, there's this great report, which I can see if I can dig out from the, it's Healthcare Without Harm. They did a report back in 2016. They compared all the major energy sources, and they compared climate impact, but they also compared occupational impact, risks to workers in those industries, both in the creation of the product, whatever it is, or mining the fuel, but also, operating the systems. And really, wind, solar, and geothermal come out safest for the public to live near, for the public to be involved in production, and to be involved in participating in these industries and the climate impacts. So when you weigh it all, renewables are still the best, but certainly we have to minimize the impacts of renewables because there's no energy source without impact. And the battery issue is even thornier. The other good piece, though, I'd mentioned about energy storage is that there are other sources of energy storage beyond lithium batteries. There's very ancient technologies like gravity storage. I see Greg's nodding his head. There's mechanical storage, energy storage. And so I hope that Wisconsin starts exploring those areas too, so that we can begin to use other solutions that are, pretty inert and safe as well, and reduce special heavy metal mining needs and things like that.
Thank you, Heather. Time check here.
Oh, sorry.
We want to get to Jill in terms of Enbridge and Line 3. Greg, you had a finishing point?
Well, I guess. Just wanted to ask you to say a few words about the VW settlement. It seems like that is being redirected to areas which are outside of energy, which seems like a natural place for those funds to go. What's happening with that, and what is Renew? How is Renew involved in redirecting those funds? Or
Yeah, great question. So, like I mentioned earlier, the governor had proposed the 10 million. And I'll keep this brief because I know we're pressed for time. We want to get to the report. We're likely not going to see that 10 million used for funds, but some of the funds have already been used. The majority have been used already for vehicle projects themselves. It's not for station funds. But the 5 million, it's a compromise. It's still going to be used for station funds, but it's a compromise between those like us and other organizations who want that 10 million from VW funds and those who want zero. So we're kind of in the middle, which isn't bad. It's not a bad thing. And also there's no talk yet of where that remaining 5 million could go for stations or elsewhere. We're allotted, we can use 15% of our allotment for stations, which would be 10 million. So that 5 million just cuts it right in half. But there's no word yet where the other 5 million is going. So obviously our stance would be we'd love to use that entire 10 million for the funds, but 5 million is better than nothing right now. It could still put a huge dent in where we need to go.
Thank you, Jeremy.
thanks.
Thank you, Greg. Can we move on to the next phase? And with time ticking, we do ask if people can stay a little bit longer if we talk a little bit more with Jill. Julie, would you like to introduce Jill?
Yes, first of all, I want to thank our speakers from Renew.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we learned a lot and very good join us. And it's a nice relationship we've had over the last few years with Tyler and now with you. So we hope to continue that. Now, Jill Ferguson, welcome back from Minneapolis, from Minnesota. And are you there with us, Jill?